My name is Joyce Mann, and this is our last conversation with Joe. And with Joe is his daughter, Jorin, who has experienced the adventure and journey that Joe has taken through the years as a phenomenal sculpture artist. And I'm so glad that Jorin is with us. And Joe, I'd like to start this conversation beginning with let's see why and how you got to Sonoma County.
Well, first of all, I got evicted from San Francisco along with 11 other artists from the Dolger Art Center. It was a co-op founded by the let's see,
City?
Daly City, the city of Daly City. It's in the little area of Westlake. I'd enjoyed about a number of years there, and the city felt that it was too good for a bunch of artists to hang out at. I had built a kiln in the back and had a number of these sculptures that are around the property there, and they served us an eviction notice because they wanted to make it into some sort of a corporation yard.
So you found this place?
So I said, geez, I got to do something. I'm getting sort of ready to retire. And I either that or I'm going to be facing these high rent problems that everybody's having now. So I got in my my little truck and took a drive, and I went as far north as Laytonville and on the Lost Coast area, and said, this is too far. I still have a few more months of teaching, half a year, a semester. Anyway.
So 1995?
In 1995, yeah. So I was combing the coast, but the prices on the coast were much more than I had anticipated. And anyway, I couldn't rate a check that big. What I did do though is went through Laytonville, Boonville, coming on 128 towards Cloverdale. I thought it would check that again, but here we are, and I stopped at a little sign on the road that said for sale by owner, and so I called the guy, or the old guy, Bill, who was the resident, came out, and I saw his truck was halfway full of beer cans. Now, I know what that means. It means I'd probably see him downtown somewhere. But on the other hand, he didn't look happy, and I didn't realize that his wife had passed away, and the place was in pretty rough shape.
So it was
20 years later, it's not so rough a shape because my daughter and I put a lot of time into the property. I think her influence made a lot more difference than mine, but it gave me a place to put my sculptures. I had to move them out of the city, and I don't fit in normal Del Webb situations with 1-ton pieces of clay and other materials.
So I think you should tell us the
Joe, tell us about the room that you're sitting in.
This is the for sale sign was in the Alder Glen District Schoolhouse. Makes a good story for this old house kind of thing, because I don't want to say how much I paid for it, but it had the potential to house. It was actually an acre and a half that had been lopped off the county line for purposes of a school about 1900. And
Currently occupied by many woodpeckers.
oh, you really are rushing to get to the
Well, she
woodpecker.
just asked, she wanted to know more about the studio.
Oh, the studio is
The room that we're in right now.
right here is the main room of the one-room studio. And then resident to family of woodpeckers, California acorn woodpeckers. And they would frequently, wake me up to this kind of like, I don't know if you get that sound, but that was the sound I got. And knock, 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 knock. And I jump out of bed. I was sleeping on the sleeper couch here when I first got it, and jump out of bed and pull up my jeans and go to the door, and quack, 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 quack. They would fly off. And oh my God, this is too much for me. And so I went to the back wall and up into the attic to see if there was any treasure up there. And at that time there wasn't any, but lots of vermin such as bat, iguana, and so forth and so forth. But I noticed all these little holes in the wall. Yes, that's what they were. They were the woodpecker holes, about 100 years of drilling into there, and a truckload of, when I started to take it out, of acorns. It was their stash. They would, into the wall, and then put an acorn in there, and then they'd come back and retrieve it, maybe to get some more protein, such as acorn worms and so forth. But anyway, I got the attic partially clean, and I left some of them up there for Hannes in future years. How did I know that? I didn't. But anyway, we
so they can see the acorn hole. They can see the collaboration.
oh, that
so
there's little dots of light behind us.
Yeah.
Are, yeah, I'm sure they can see it better than I.
Well, we can.
Oh, they're good. It's too bad we can't see the colors shine through.
I was still teaching at San Francisco State and had some access. Somebody else was teaching class at that time because of my, I was having some eye problems. And more about that as we get into the story. But the acorn were removed from the place, and I tried to deter them on the outside with little things that would flash and keep them away. They were getting evicted, as I did down in the city. And we have a little, this is take two, problem with the, I don't know what I'm saying right now. I'm losing a train of thought. Get me back on track, Joyce.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I've heard about, and this was before my time, was crimson rose. And I have a lot of people say, oh, I remember that piece, that sculpture so well. Tell me something about crimson rose, please.
Well, crimson rose was the statue of a woman. It was a woman of her times, done about 1990. I'm just estimating the time. I was teaching a class at San Francisco State in ceramics area in mold making, and the use of plaster molds in creating sculpture. And so I thought as a finale for that class, we'll have the 10 or 15 students that was working with me to do a life cast from Crimson Rose, who was a model that I had used before. She was a fire dancer, and she had consented. She said, "Oh yeah, I'll go for that."
Weren't there like 26 models or something? Some crazy.
Well,
different people?
the main body cast was the whole class was getting a lesson on how to split a body into parts.
Mhm.
And
But did somebody have, was it all her body? Or
no,
was
it wasn't all her body. It was like the face was of another woman and in the class. And Crimson Rose was the body cast, and she had to kind of stand in that frozen position for a couple hours. It doesn't sound like a lot of time, but being kind of capped frozen for a couple hours is not literally frozen, but standing rigid. And she almost fell out of the mold when we split the mold. And then the individual details came from different women in the class.
Mhm.
I took hands from I looked at all the women and did auditions of hands and feet. Auditions, something like that.
Handitions.
Handitions. Yeah, something like that.
The end result was a full-size nude sculpture in all different textures that was standing in the front yard for years. And when I first moved up here, there she was, and all the truck drivers and people from, I had people in the Corte Madera Apple store say, "Oh, you're that property. I know that place. There's newts." And, so all the art people who drive by going to Mendocino,
Truck drivers.
all the art people knew about us
Yeah.
because it was sculpture in the yard and this nude ceramic woman. And all the truck drivers and everybody else knew about this place too, because of that. And unfortunately, about 4 years ago, during one of our winter storms, the oak tree that she was standing right under came down, and the roots uplifted the whole thing, and she took a big space. So all we have is the bottom from the torso down now. She has a very nice bottom, but that's all we have.
Right. I'm sure you miss her.
Yeah, surprisingly, actually, she was kind of a property muse.
Right. Well, I have been to your property, Joe, and it is filled with sculptures of all different kinds. A lot of them, to me, has a message. Others are quirky, and I think it's wonderful. And to me, the property is an outdoor museum, and it's going to continue that way. Would you like to talk about some of the pieces that are in the back or describe your property? I am going to put up some photographs of the backyard on the website.
So like the wall, maybe?
Well, the first thing was to get all of my sculpture that I had made out of Daly City, and it took about 2 months of trip after trip after trip in my truck and other trucks, and to get some of the heavyweight outdoor and indoor pieces up here. And so it was a stressful move for sure. At that same time, I was having some bouts, health issues, and as I got closer and closer to it, I got some of the more difficult things handled. But the indoor pieces, I had to get out of the weather, because there's more fragile things on the inside, and I didn't want to spend the rest of my time in life cleaning glass and clay pieces. But the outdoor stuff is made to weather and could take it, I thought, except for Crimson Rose. I never expected for that tree to uproot and so forth. But the pieces, some of them weighing up to a ton, 2,000 pounds of fragile clay elements, pieces, and some of them made in a tile factory that we terracotta pipe factory in Southern California and over in Niles. But
The big sphere, the concrete sphere, you did that in Daly City too?
I did that in Richmond, my studio, when I moved up to there.
That must have been something to bring up.
It rode easy.
Did it?
It fit in the,
Heavy?
it's fit in the confines of the back of the pickup, pickup. So that did work.
Did that partially influence you to go work lighter and get back into foam?
Oh, it did.
I'll bet.
You know, it's almost a relief.
Foam and toys, right? That
Foam and
lit,
toys.
Lit and springs, right?
Well, what forced me to get back into other alternatives of things that I had shown in some interest in before was one, I didn't have access to the facilities at San Francisco State. In other words, I didn't have a glass furnace anymore, and some of the kilns there had supported some of my ideas. And but the real reason was I got interested in a place called Lytton Springs, run by the Salvation Army back then, and it was an access distribution center for the materials collected by the Salvation Army and resold to the people of the area. It was really a mine for art supplies for me and furniture. Charles Ames knockoff chair was $15, including the little, things like that are really fantastic.
Is that where the gun series came from?
Yeah.
That was
And the
toys.
Then toys, tons of toys, not tons of toys, pounds, lots of toys, and plastic. There were plastic elements that it was very colorful, and all of them had significance to our style of life and what we were giving our kids to play with. For instance, guns and brightly colored objects, toys, and the language of form is in toys, a lot of, and so finding those and figuring out what I could do with them, and the first round was putting them together by glue and foam, urethane foam, in matrices of almost like oppression, and I had worked with foam back in the mid 60s when in San Jose I did a show down there when foam first came out as an artist material. And the one piece that I did do is a wall piece up here. Joan's gonna do you a little, kind of hard to see at this angle because the chiaroscuro, the light and dark relationship doesn't register real strong as a, but I thought it was fascinating that you could put an inch thick slab of material, which would have weighed 1,000 pounds in clay, up there with little picture hanging wire, and I had some degree of success with those pieces. I did some social statements with them down in San Jose, where I did some pieces where I was using doll parts with this oppressive sort of form, pushing them and manipulating them and forcing them as though it were a tide of energy. And one such piece I took and put it on. They were building the library shortly after I moved to San Francisco, but they were building a library and they put this construction wall around it out of plywood. And I asked my buddy Lou, I want to put this on the side of the construction wall. And I had used a number of doll parts, hands and legs and things that I found at flea markets, and being pushed by this wave of foam. It was during the strike that San Francisco State, that I even had the idea to put it on a real life situation. And that was sort of one of the reasons that we were striking, was for the right to have a say in the forces that educate us and the forces that move our lives in problematic ways. And well, I didn't realize that the Black issues that we were confronting at San Francisco State was going to be I still don't know. I wasn't there when the vandals smashed the piece to bits. They probably took a 2x4 or some tool like that and just bashed it into dust. And there it was, nakedly, blatantly ruined. A couple of months before that, it had another piece which had to do with Black issues, issues of the cultural progression was the name of the piece. And it was called A Progression, which is a musical term. And I was going to the Monterey Jazz Festival that autumn, and I did these kind of circular shapes, pushing or forcing these Black faces, one, and then there was two, which is a sort of a progression. And I thought of it as a positive thing. And I titled the piece Progression and took it to the Monterey Jazz. Yay, I won first award in sculptural ideas. And so it wasn't thought, it was a totally different kind of energy that confronted it at the Monterey Jazz Festival, then confronted it in front of a library soon to be built at San Francisco State. Anyway,
So then
in the trash that went.
yeah, but so rising out of all of that came more foam and toys when you moved up here, right?
When I came here, I didn't have access to some of the tools. I had originally intended to build a studio in the back here with furnaces and that, but it didn't happen. And
You want to describe a little bit how you got into the foam, the whole water thing with the foam, that technique that you were using to do this piece and the other ones? Because that
Yeah.
was new to up here, right? This is
Well, it was,
the
you know,
foam.
foam being plastic is, it's like what they make surfboards out of, and cast boats and things like that. When you pour 50-50 mix together, the plastic as a liquid is heavier than water, and so you mix it with colorants. And I had this big half hemisphere of steel out there filled with water, and I would pour in the liquid foam, and it would go to the bottom, and then it would start generating gas. And as it did, the foam would come to the surface as a blanket of a very lightweight material. So it was technically a revelation to me as to what it might do, stand for, and my mind switched from one thing to space. It reminded me very much like some of the images I had seen online on TV, science programs, mainly from space. And I went off on that. Natural forms such as
Right. Well, I hear that you also have a sanctuary for birds and other animals in your backyard going among your sculptures. Is that correct?
well, especially chickens and ducks.
One of the funny things about what he was just talking about is I think that hemisphere that he was just talking about
Uh-huh.
that was originally, was it my duck pond?
Yeah.
That had been my duck pond when I was 10 years old.
Oh,
Actually bought me the duck for 25 cents in somewhere in Southern California when I was about 10 years old. That was
right.
my first duck. And we had a buoy that I was living up in Annapolis at the time. We had, the top third of a buoy, or maybe it was the bottom third of the buoy, had been cut off. 2/3 of it became a cannibal tub. My mom made a hot tub out of it, a wood-fired hot tub. And then the top third was my duck pond, which then traveled around from studio to studio to studio for decades with my dad, being used as, you know, made, and many of the big spheres we have around the property have been made using this duck pond as a mold after it stopped being a duck pond. And one of the funny things about it now is we just a month and a half ago got 3 new ducklings. So this is the first time in 40 years that I had ducks again. I've been waiting for a long time for these ducks. And we are repurposing that duck pond into a duck pond again. So it's
Great.
and
Jorin, you have had an interesting childhood, much more so than a lot of children, going around with Joe and watching him change materials. Fascinating. Now, are you an artist as well?
no, I bake bread. I'm a big
As
baker.
an artist, being an artist, baking bread, I can't bake bread. Now, I remember meeting Joe in 2003. You entered our very first exhibit of sculptures outside in a public place in 2003, and you were selected. And the first piece that you had was called Emerge. And that was something I think you made at Gladding. Is that true? Am I got it right?
Glad, you know, yes, I made that piece when I was on sabbatical up at Lincoln, California at the Gladding McBean factory. Huge 100-year-old company.
Right.
Rooted tubing, pipe, and virtually built buildings with pressed clay into molds, plaster molds. Then you'll see some of the evidence of that in the local county courthouses up in the
Well, your piece was the first one to arrive. We had at that point in time all of the sculptures in the plaza. And I happened to be in the plaza, and a workman was going through and stopped me and said, "What's going on?" And I explained we were going to have sculptures in the plaza. And he asked me, "What is this?" That was your piece he was pointing to. And I said, "What do you think it is?" And he says, "Oh, it's a sprouting onion." He was close.
Very close.
Right. So after that, you again exhibit in 2004, and this time it was a fragment of Forgotten Ancestor. And that piece won Best of Show.
Right. I was very proud of that piece. I had made that piece in Hawaii, and it was made from a hand extruder, pressing out little pipe, little clay square pipe. And the students there, I was a visiting instructor there, and we went, "What's he doing?" It's the first time that extruders had been employed in making art at the University of Hawaii, and I stacked them up in cross hatch fashion, and then as the piece dried, I fired it and pushed, packed the end of the pipe, the hollow core pipe, with steel pipe, which would support the weight of the probably 1,000-pound piece of clay. And so it stood on these legs, which really looked more like forces of rain and weather.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, also,
Yeah. So it was me, like brought back memories of the Montana sky that I was.
uh-huh. Okay. Well, also in 2004, you exhibited for a month long at the Reveille. We didn't have any art galleries at that time, so we turned in half of the Reveille building into an art gallery. And you exhibited one of your toy series ensembles. And that really drew a lot of attention, and it was extremely well liked. Then in 2005, you were a judge for our show. And so you became a very well respected artist and member of our community, Joe. And also in 2005, Sonoma County decided to have Sculpture Sonoma, and they had various sculpture exhibits become part of this Sonoma sculpture. And you helped us with our booth in Santa Rosa, Joe. I remember all of these things, even though it was quite some time ago. Then in 2009, you had another piece in our show, and it was called AZ Twister. And I think it was part of the Twister series that you did at Mission Clay. Is that correct?
That's true. That's true. And I used to get going back and forth in the 60s from El Paso to California,
Uh-huh.
military leave situation, that I would zip across the desert with my buddies and get back to California. And in the middle of these desert plains, you'd see a wind come up and catch the sand, and like a three-dimensional rising of it was a form. It was like a twister. It was like, that's where I got the name, and it was like a tornado of pulling dust off the desert floor and pushing it high into the sky. And under certain lighting conditions, it was very dramatic. And I remember that when I got an invitation to go to Arizona with the Mission Clay. Brian Vansell was responsible for that invitation, and it was wonderful to go. I had worked at their factories up in Lincoln, not Lincoln, that was another company. But in Niles, which is Fremont area. But the first thing I thought about was try to make some really dramatic Now, you can't just stand there in one place and try to get around the twister or around that cylinder or column of energy with a scribe or anything that's going to make a difference in this massive clay, which is about 3.5 inches thick and in a leather hard consistency. So I put it on. I found that they had a rotary wheel. It's like a potter's wheel on steroids. And you put a 1,700-pound piece of clay on it and turn it. It turned it very easily. And what did I have to make the marks with? But I had experimented with this before, but was the strength of a forklift. And I would take the forklift, and Brian, the owner of the company, the family owns it, he was also a close associate of mine in San Francisco University. And he got on in the forklift seat, and we worked it out as though it were choreographed beats. And I directed the forks into the side of the piece, and as it went into the side and moved up, the first mark on that particular piece was to penetrate it and tear open the cylinder to expose its inner space, and then take the fork up on a slow rate of incline, and it flailed off the surface of clay and which kept its integrity even after the fire. It was a beautiful sense of the dynamics of both the wind that I've seen in the desert and the forces that could be moved, in this case, by the blade of the fork. And so that was where that piece came in. And I felt very proud of the piece. I got off of it very excited. And Brian, also a sculptor student at the time when I knew him, I said, Brian, wouldn't Voulkos have been proud of that one? He knew what I meant. And Pete Voulkos, being a prominent Bay Area sculptor and moving masses of clay and other materials, definitely would have been. Anyway, I have that piece here now on the property. It was in your sculpture, Cloverdale.
Jorin and Joe, would you like to add anything else about living in Sonoma County or your property or anything else?
One thing that I'd love to not to get missed is the wall, which is what we call a piece that he's done on the property. And because it's done in place here, you have to come and see it.
Right.
So that's what I think you've got listed as the edge. And so,
Right. Well, Joe, I want to tell you something. I have greatly enjoyed the venture and journey that you have taken me on during the past 4 interviews with you. It's been terrific. Thank you very much. Before we say goodbye, I want to, for the people who will be watching and listening to the videos, I would like to read your artist statement. Your statement is, my work is a continuous conversation of the language of form. The most reoccurring form in my work has been the sphere. I attempt to create forms of delight, truth, and fancy, as well as forms about science and spirit, the world, the universe, a metaphor, a ball, a time, a place, and some space. Now, I want to encourage the visitors to the website who's going to not only listen to the videos, but to look at the collateral material, that to look at your work and try and find and always look for the reoccurring skill. Joe and Jorin, thank you very, very much.
Well, thank you, Joyce. You know, I'm going to add a little here because that's the significance of space in our time is monumental. You know, with the technology of the conquest of space in my lifetime has been an inspiration to me, both in form and in space. I get worried and concerned for it and want to help it because it is that space that must be preserved and not be another ocean of pollution. What we're doing to this earth is criminal, you know, with the trash we put in the ocean and the way we treat our animals and in sea. But I hope space, it should be stopped at every most get a high ground power in the earth. Don't let it happen. Go to space for beauty and not for war.
Thank you, Joe, very much. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.